Conductor Meada Taylor at your service. Just in case you didn't know, I'm a puppeteer. And on my channel, Kuumba Creative Puppets, you will learn the ins and outs of how to put on a puppet show. Now, if you are a parent, a teacher of some sort, like, share, and subscribe into this world of puppetry. Today, we are going to cover part 1 of how to trigger ideas for a puppet show. Okay, let's get to it.
Kuumba-Nia, creativity with a purpose. Hey! Kuumba-Nia, creativity with a purpose. Yeah! Creativity with a purpose. Hey! Kuumba-Nia, creativity with a purpose.
Well, welcome to part 1 of how to trigger ideas for a puppet show. I encourage you to engage in the entire series because what you will learn here, you can use even for the rest of the process of putting on a puppet show. The tools you will need a pen or pencil and a notepad, or if you want, your electronic device. And all this is for jotting down ideas. Now, just make sure it's something that you can take wherever you go and make it your go-to tool for, jotting down ideas, okay? The other thing you're going to need is the imaginary treasure chest, the ITC. Say what? Yeah. The ITC is just basically used to collect things, okay? And I'm going to ask you to put 3 things in there to start. Now, it could be something that's really important to you or special to you, or just anything that grabs your attention. Just 3 things, and put it in that, and put it in your chest. Now, it doesn't matter what the chest is made of. It could be a cardboard box. It could be a plastic container. It could be a sack of some sort. Or, it could be one of those cheap, what they call them? String backpacks. Doesn't matter. The thing is that you have something to collect things in. But we're not going to put any puppets in here. Not yet. Okay? So, the other thing that you're going to need is a designated notebook. A full-size notebook, whether you prefer loose leaf or the little spiral kind. And this is to write your stories, because your ideas may come before we even finish this series. But we're going to talk about how to write a puppet script later on. Or if you're already past the, having an idea and you want to maybe get some assistance in another part of the puppet production, leave me a comment below and I'll be sure to try to help you out, okay? All right. But the overall objective in this series of how to trigger ideas for a puppet show is 1, to develop the creativity within. And I know. Some of you are saying, I don't have a creative bone in my body. Not true. Okay? That is not true. Because think about it. Who's the greatest creative of them all? Huh? Okay. Well, I'll leave you a moment to soak on that one. Now, to get those creative juices flowing, there's some different triggers that we can use to make that happen, okay? Because let's face it, the times that we are living in, all the uncertainty, all of the changes, I'm talking about drastic changes that we're facing, it can kind of become overwhelming and kind of sort of numb us. And really, creativity is probably the last thing on our mind. But believe it or not, you do it every day, because all creativity is solving problems. Did you know that? Okay, well, not only that, but it is needed. It's really needed. And plus, it's quite therapeutic. How do we spark creativity? How do we get what's already inside us to churn and to turn? Okay? We're going to break it down into 3 sections. 1, the internal. What's already natural to you? What already is innate to you? Your emotions, your soul. Okay? 2, The external, the influence that comes from the outside, and we're going to call that the body, okay? And then 3, the research, which has to do with the mind, okay, what is learned. And all these things intertwine with each other. I don't think really any of these things can do without the other. You know, they just come together, mind, body, and soul, internal, external, and research, okay? So let's start with the internal. Now, this is going to include utilizing what I call thought spontaneity. What does that mean? Well, it's the process of thinking on the fly. Just thinking at the moment that the moment is given and you have to think of something, okay? So we want to develop that. I remember, I think it was back in 2016, and I have a little studio at the art gallery here in Lockport. That's where I'm at, Lockport, New York, Western New York. And they always have these art shows going on. So I said, well, I don't do really fine art. I'm not a sculptor per se. I think I'm going to do a show about puppetry. Okay, so that is what I did. And Channel 7 got a whim of it, and they came to interview me for that event. And I was asked, Mr. Randall, I think he was the person in charge at that time, was asked to put on a puppet because he was going to interact with me. So we didn't rehearse a thing. You know, this was on the fly. So I had to do it on the fly. And, you know, being that, you know, I've been doing puppetry for almost, a little over 20 years now, it wasn't a frightful thing for me, but it's always a challenge because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what the outcome is going to be because you didn't stop and ponder and think about it. You just had to do it. And so I just did it. And it turned out pretty good. What I'll do is I'll leave a link in the description below of that particular time. You could take a look for yourself and make a judgment for yourself. Yeah. Okay. The other thing in the internal is becoming more aware acutely of your 5 senses. Okay. And we'll go over that later on. Not in this video, in another video. Okay. And 3, becoming in tune with your any emotions, like what triggers them. And number 4, what are your responses to these inner emotions? Okay? What are they? How do you respond to different circumstances? All right, so let's move on to the external. Now, the external involves becoming aware of your surroundings. So many times we're on that phone or that iPad or you know, just anything else but where we are at the moment. And it's a good thing to become in tune with what is around you. Okay, the people, the animals, the nature, man-made objects. What is around you? Do you ever really stop and look? Huh? Do you really? Okay. And 2, paying attention to the emotions of others. This is where compassion comes from. Okay, being in tune with not just you and yourself and I, as they say, but becoming aware of other people's emotions and responding how they respond to things. You know, it may not be the same way you respond to things. They may respond a totally different way to the same circumstance, but becoming aware of it is really important. Okay, and 4, observing things as they are. For instance, I know this is a pen, right? And then thinking of other ways this pen can be used. So we have this pen, and this pen can become a dart in my imagination, okay? So the whole key to puppetry is seeing things as they are, but what can they become? That's the question that you ask. And I give you an example. This is nothing but a cup. But if you remember in The Beauty and the Beast, this cup became a little boy and he had a chip in it. And his name was Chip. So the imagination is not just seeing things as they are. That's not imagination. Imagination is seeing what they can become. And this is the whole key to puppetry. Okay, and finally we have research. Remember, that's the mind. The more that we have in our knowledge portfolio, the more we have to work with. Now, if you think about it, have you ever been to a restaurant and you have some kids, so they give you those little pack of 3 crayons and a paper placemat for the kids to color? Imagine what they can do with a 64 pack of crayons. Huh? Okay. And what can you do to build your portfolio? So if you read already, you already have a big part of this knocked out in the ballpark, so to speak. So in particular, you want to pay attention to fairy tales, folk tales, fables, legends, myths, nursery rhymes, poetry. You know, it depends on the age group of the child that you're sharing this with. Okay? 2, stay informed with your current events, whether they be local, state, nation, or worldwide. Okay? Because this can also trigger ideas, things that are happening in the world today. 3, you can learn about history. Of course, if you're in school, you're already starting to learn about history, so that's another advantage. And you can use that about historical figures, historical times, inventions. Is there anybody particular that you always wanted to go a little bit more in depth to find out about? That could be a puppet show. This is Black History right now, and there are plenty of people to research and do a puppet show. And then you can look what you already have inside of you, the things that you already know, and the things that you already experienced. So that's something you can use. You can ask logical questions and go and do the research to find the answers. Or if one of your students or children say, well, what about have them go and do the research? See how all this is very educational too? Okay? All right. And then also you can ask silly questions and come up with silly answers. So you see, both factual and imaginary influence can trigger ideas for a puppet show. I'm going to say that again. Both factual and imaginary influences can trigger ideas for a puppet show. All right. So that brings us to our first activity, and that is brainstorming. Now, I know some of you probably heard about this. Maybe you've even done it in your classrooms or with your children. But the thing is, this is going to activate what I called before, remember, thought, spontaneity, thinking on the fly, thinking at the moment, okay? And in this activity, this is what you will do. We're going to brainstorm 10 or more ideas in a 2 minutes time. Okay? And the line that you're going to use for this is, my puppet show is about blank. Okay? So you're going to set your timer for 2 minutes. But however, there are some rules to brainstorming. One is there's no judging. There's no laughing at somebody else's idea. There's no criticism saying, oh, that's a stupid idea. No, we don't hear that. That is not a creative environment. Okay? Wild and crazy ideas are welcomed. It doesn't matter how far out they may seem or how crazy they may seem. The crazier, the better. Okay? 3, there's no pondering. Just spit them out. There's no thinking about it. Just whatever comes to your mind. Whatever comes to your mind. Write it down. Write it down. And 4, the quantity is overruling the quality at this point. The more you have, the more you have to work with. Remember I mentioned that before? 3 packs of crayons, 64 pack of crayons. So the more that you spit out, the more that you have to work with. And this is the final rule that I'm going to give you. When the time is up, stop. Don't put another letter, don't cross another T or dot another I. Put that pencil or pen down. Stop this. Freeze the thumbs. So you're going to look those over, how many ever you have. And I want you to write down the first three that really kind of stick out to you. I'm not saying number one, number two, number three. The three that sticks out to you the most. I'm just going to give you an example because I did this ahead of time so that you can kind of see how this works. Now, I timed myself 2 minutes and I just stopped at 10 because there would be a lot to go over on a video. So my top 10, this is what came. Remember I said wild and crazy. So don't be, you'll probably raise your eyebrows to some of these, but this is what came out of my head. Okay. Elephants running a race. Egg cars. Numbers growing in a garden. Finger chairs. Sun that tells stories. Trees riding on a motorcycle. Food recyclables. Soft trampoline floors. Paper kites. And the last one I had was the phone that refused to ring. Now, you could tell none of these have anything to do with the other. All right? But sometimes you may have some that you can kind of combine. You can do that. You could combine, one or two together and you have one. You can do that. Okay? So now that was the diverge part, where anything goes out there wild and crazy to the more. All right? Now we're going to kind of narrow it down. We're going to converge. So I'm giving you some terms here. Diverge, converge. All right? And I want you to pick the three that stick out the most to you. Now, the three that stuck out the most to me was numbers growing in the garden, sun that tells stories. I'm talking about the shining sun, not, baby sun. Okay. And three, trees riding on motorcycles. Why they stick out? I don't know. Okay. So you're going to narrow it down to the three that stick out to you the most. So those were the three that I chose. Okay. Now you start to evaluate them. Not why you chose them, but what can you draw out of them. Okay. So let's go with numbers growing in the garden. Okay. Imagine that. Numbers growing in the garden. Now, who could I do a puppet show like that for? Maybe pre-K to maybe first or second grade? I think so, right? Yeah. And they can learn their numbers, right? Yes. And then I started thinking, I said, well, not only numbers, but letters can grow in the garden. So that's show number 2, right? Okay, so letters growing out of a garden. And then you have your small letters and you have your big letters, right? Aha. Okay, and then those letters have sound and on and on and on. So out of one idea, you can have at least 3 or 4 shows, right? That's the way it works. Okay. Then I looked at the sun that tells stories. Now, I imagine the sun and it rises, right? And it sees everything that goes on in the earth. Now, depending on where you are on the earth, how long that sun stays up, but then it settles down. And what are all the things in that time span when the sun was risen? What did it see? Okay, and my third one was trees riding on a motorcycle. I just thought it was so silly. So I picked that one too because I imagine actually a real tree riding on a motorcycle. And it probably, I imagine a winter tree with no leaves on it. All its branches are sticking every which way out. And it's on a motorcycle. And you know the reputation for motorcycles. They're loud. They don't smell very well. And so I thought of more of like a behavior kind of thing, It's making a lot of noise, right? Bringing attention to itself. And it's all spread out and wild and crazy and everywhere. And you know, if it's sticking out and it's rolling down the road, it's going to disrupt things that are around them. And that's what crazy behavior does. It disrupts things around them. So that's something. And you guys are free to take any of these ideas and run with it. In fact, leave a comment on if this sparked anything for you. Yeah, and even email me if you come up with a story. Or say my puppet show is about blah, blah, blah. You know, what you came up with, okay? So this is only one trigger though. This is only one trigger. And sometimes it doesn't work the first time. Sometimes you have to go back maybe to your 10 ideas that you came up with and choose a different 3. Or maybe you don't like any of your ideas and you just restart it all over again and come up with some new ideas. And that's okay. Or maybe this process is not working for you. But like I said, there's more than one way to come up with an idea. So on my next video, we will be going over how to use your 5 senses to come up with ideas for a puppet show. Okay? So please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you there. Again, Meada Taylor, Kuumba Creative Puppets, creativity with a purpose. Kuumba.
Kuumba-Nia, creativity with a purpose. Kuumba.